Hey everybody, welcome to the briefing room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us on this Thursday as we continue to track the storm that will not go away. Hurricane Dorian, now a Category 2, winds 110 miles an hour as it's lashing the Carolina coast at this hour. Residents there are hunkered down, weathering out this storm, and our meteorologist Greg Dutra is tracking it all the way. Greg, you're in the Weather Center. Any change to the storm track right now? Who's getting hardest hit?
No, there's no change, which is very good. It looks like everything's going according to the forecast, but the hardest hit, that is definitely along the coast of South Carolina now and moving to North Carolina. This thing's like the song that never ends. Seems like Dorian just doesn't want to go away, but it will very quickly start to move away from the eastern seaboard over the next about 48 hours. But here it is as a Category 2. Now you'll notice some misshapenness of the eye, definitely losing a little bit of strength as it starts to interact with land, but it is still just 1 mile per hour below Category 3 strength. Those current winds are up in the tropical storm force range, 50 miles per hour in Charleston, above 52 miles per hour out in Pawleys Island, and Wilmington is now starting to see the effects. Let's focus on Wilmington and get the future track on there, because Wilmington's winds will go up significantly through the next few hours. Here it goes. Dorian tracking up the coast. This is late tonight, early tomorrow morning. This is also the best chance for us to see landfall. I don't think in Wilmington, but more likely up around the Outer Banks here as it slides up to the north. You see all that wind blowing the water in towards the shoreline, causing about 4 to 7 foot storm surges on top of wave action that'll be around 3 or 4 feet. And then it pulls the ejection handle and just slips out to sea very quickly. By Saturday morning, 90 mile per hour winds well off of the eastern seaboard, maybe bringing some outer band showers to possibly coastal Massachusetts and maybe even to coastal New York State too. That's all we got, Devin. Thankfully things will wrap up, but it'll get worse before it gets better through the next about 12 hours.
I'm dreaming of the ejection handle, Greg.
Yeah,
I like that
same
analogy. We'll wait for that thing to be pulled. Thank you so much. Well, the destruction in the Bahamas is no laughing matter. President Trump getting an update today. The Prime Minister of the Bahamas now raising the death toll there to at least 20, expecting the number to climb further. Much of the flooding, the Prime Minister said, has receded in Freeport, Nassau. The economic engine of the Bahamas appears to be doing well, which is some good news. But the humanitarian crisis on the islands is significant. And a short time ago, I caught up with Janae Eli with the American Red Cross, who gave me this update on the conditions on the island.
Right now, initial assessments have really confirmed what a lot of people feared, which is that there are tens of thousands of people impacted by Hurricane Dorian. Really big needs right now are things like emergency shelter and water. A lot of water gets contaminated when storms like this happen, and if people don't have clean water, they can have sickness. That's really one of the biggest priorities for us right now.
And do you have the sense, Janelle, that the wheels are turning on the international aid effort? Are you starting to see planes and helicopters come in, any of that water starting to flow?
So at the Red Cross, we've had volunteers and items pre-positioned, but today we're actually expecting 38 tons more of aid to arrive this afternoon. That's things like shelter kits, which include tools for people to repair their homes. That includes things like jerry cans to help them out with water, and other items that can keep people healthy, like hygiene items.
And we're looking at some of the pictures as we're talking to Janelle of just the utter devastation on Abaco Island, which it just looks like a giant trash dump, splinters of buildings and forest. Hard to see how people will even be able to stay on that island. Do you get the sense that there's a major effort underway to get people to shelters in other places?
Certainly, people have been evacuated for medical care. I know that's one of the things that the Red Cross is meeting people at the airport and helping transport them to hospitals, for example, and get them first aid when they arrive. I will say there is absolute devastation, especially in the inner parts of Abaco Island. But I think it's also important to remember when we see these pictures that it's not just about houses, right, and roads and infrastructure, but it's about the uncertainty of living through this hurricane season. Some people still don't know whether their family members are safe. Some people don't know whether their houses have been affected. And so it really takes an emotional toll on people as well.
Yeah, psychologically, I can't even imagine coming to grips with what a lot of these people are facing. Finally, a lot of our viewers asking how they can help. Janelle, what's your best guidance for how Americans can get involved if they want to chip into this effort somehow?
So if Americans want to get involved, they can donate to the U.S. and Bahamas through redcross.org or 1-800-RED-CROSS. They can even text 90999. They can text Dorian to 90999, and that will make a donation to the Red Cross for hurricane relief efforts. I just want to say one more thing. I think it's really important for people to take the time to recognize that this is the moment to prepare themselves and their own families for when disasters hit them, right? This is the time to learn first aid, get an evacuation plan with your family what you will do if the disaster hits. I think this is a devastating time, but it's a good reminder for people to get prepared.
Our thanks again to Janelle Eli with the American Red Cross down there in the Bahamas. The Bahamian Prime Minister overnight, after talking to President Trump, said the U.S. has promised significant financial aid to the island. Today, the president, for his part, has been focused on the forecast of Dorian as it moves up the coast, retweeting the National Weather Service. This as he's been taking some heat for his comments the past few days about the forecast of the storm to hit Alabama overnight. Jimmy Kimmel poked some fun at that.
Now, this was the real original chart, which did not include Alabama, and this is what Trump showed us today with Alabama in it. So the question is, who at the White House would do this? Could it be someone who loves Sharpies?
So I called up the folks at Sharpie, and I said, do me a favor. Can you make the pen in black? Make it look rich? And he said, not only we can do that, we can put your signature on. See, that's your signature right there.
Yeah, that's right. He's not even trying to hide the lies anymore. Not only do we have fake news, we now have fake weather, too. I'm hoping we get fake sports, because I want to see the Mets win the World Series, but...
All right, we could all use a laugh this week at the end of a very difficult storm, although the impacts, of course, are no laughing matter. Continue to stay with us here at ABC News Live as we track the impacts of Hurricane Dorian. Next to a major effort underway right now aimed at changing how we elect our representatives to state houses and to Congress in the coming elections. It's a fight over maps like this one. You've probably seen them before. Take a look here as they put it up. Heavily gerrymandered congressional districts drawn by partisans. They look like these squiggly little messes that may not make any sense. In fact, some of the districts, if you follow this closely and you're a politics wonk, you know that these have been mocked openly on social media. There's even a font now for gerrymandered districts. It's called Jerry, apparently. We haven't tried to spell our names with it yet, but take a look. Those are actually real congressional districts in the shape of letters. Critics, of course, say that this can be highly discriminatory to draw maps this way, also unconstitutional in some cases. And now there's a nationwide effort underway ahead of the next redistricting effort in 2021 to make these maps more fair. And I'm joined now by Virginia Case. She's leading the charge in this effort. She's the CEO of the League for Women Voters, which is one of the largest and oldest nonpartisan voter advocacy groups in the United States. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much.
And
we're excited.
You guys just made a major announcement this morning on ABC News Live. Tell us about what you're doing.
So we are launching a national redistricting campaign to fight against gerrymandering. Our organization is almost 100 years old. We were born out of the suffrage movement, and this is a full circle for us. We were protecting people having the right to vote back then and fighting for people to have the right to vote, and now today we're doing the same thing by making sure that we have fair maps and fair districts so everybody's vote counts.
A significant undertaking. You have talked about it being a multi-million-dollar, multi-state effort over many years, putting a $500,000 down payment, significant for your organization. You were telling me yesterday this is unprecedented for the League of Women Voters, which some people think of as little old ladies that register people to vote.
Yeah, and so the thing that's really important for us is that we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're not just talking about gerrymandering and wanting to have fair maps. We're making a significant investment. So we're putting $500,000 in up front. This is going to be a multi-million-dollar, multi-year campaign in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, because we think that it's important that every state has a role in helping to make sure that we have fair maps so that every person's vote counts.
Let's take a step back for a second and talk about the scope of the problem. Before the show, we were mentioning a lot of voters have a hard time putting their minds around gerrymandering and redistricting. You know, it's a political process to draw maps since the country was founded. But how has it gotten to this point where it actually can box people out at the ballot box?
It's always been an issue. The difference now, I think, is that it is so pervasive and so egregious. We've seen states where they're literally carving out little shoes and tiny quarters to make sure that the party who is in a position of power at that time is making sure that they're holding on to their constituents. So instead of people electing their elected officials, their representatives, what we're finding is that those representatives are choosing who their constituents are.
And you're making clear this happens on both sides. Your organization is nonpartisan. The position you're taking, there are a number of other efforts out there on this front, Democrats, Republicans, for their own advantage. But you're making clear this process from an objective point of view is simply out of whack.
Absolutely. It's not about left and right. It's about right and wrong. We want to make sure that everybody realizes that both parties do this. This is no big secret. Everybody knows that it happens. But it's about making sure that we're putting power back in the hands of the American people, putting power back in the hands of the voters. And so that's why this is such a significant project.
So in a nutshell, how do you do this? The Supreme Court, as you know, back in June, took a step back from this, said, look, we don't think that some of this gerrymandering is actually okay. It looks pretty anti-democratic, but it's not our job to police the system. That's where you saw an opening. So what sorts of things are on the table that you guys are trying to accomplish?
So the foundation of this campaign really is a civic engagement and community education campaign. We are a grassroots organization. We have over 750 leagues in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, and almost 400,000 members and activists. So we have a strong base of grassroots leaders who are ready to tackle this project. And so they're going to go out into their communities. They're going to work with people in their communities to talk about the issue of why just redistricting is important to them. And then we're going to build upon that. Some states have constitutional provisions like what we heard yesterday in North Carolina. Just this week, and in Pennsylvania. And then in other states, there are state legislative fixes to make sure that there are transparent processes so that people actually know what the redistricting process looks like.
Arizona is a very interesting example. They have an independent commission of people that do the drawing, not the legislators, so to take it out. That's an interesting model that you're seeking to replicate in some states, too.
In some states, in states like California, who have already done that as well, and they're actually launching their independent redistricting commissions, and they're citizen-driven commissions that are making sure that the maps are being drawn according to the people, to the voters, not just to the political parties.
Last question I want to ask you, Virginia, is how do you determine a fair standard? The Supreme Court talked a lot about this. We see a lot of partisans on social media saying, listen, it is inherently political to draw maps. No one can say what's fair or not. It's simply politics. Is there a way to set a standard where you can objectively say, you know, this is how to do it in a fair way?
There is, and there are a few different ways you can do it. But most importantly is making sure that the actual voters are involved in the map-making process. Transparency. At the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, the most important thing that voters want to know is that they were treated fairly and that their vote is counted. So by making sure that there's a transparent process where citizens and voters are engaged in drawing those maps, then you get to a fair outcome.
Well, it is great to have you here with us. Great to have the announcement first on ABC News Live. Thanks for coming in. Virginia Case, the CEO of the League of Women Voters, a big effort that will continue to follow here on ABC News Live as we head into the 2020 census and the 2020 redistricting. Hope to have you back.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Virginia. And moving on now over to the Pentagon and President Trump's controversial decision to reallocate $3.6 billion in military construction funds away from 127 projects to help fund his new border wall. Well, yesterday here on the show, Louis Martinez, our senior Pentagon reporter, told us the broad strokes of this. He's back now to tell us the details because, Louis, the Pentagon has actually identified now some very specific projects that are going to be held up, essentially, right, in the next few months and years?
That's right, Devin. Right here, I've got the two-page list in very small print. It's the 3 U.S. territories. You've got 23 states and 21 countries overseas where there are about $3.6 billion worth of military construction projects. The broad gamut, mainly really big construction projects. We're talking about airfields. We're talking about renovations of warehouses overseas. But the one that's getting really most of the attention stateside is the $400 million cut in Puerto Rico Rico. This is funding that was designated for the rebuilding of National Guard facilities, U.S. military facilities on the territory of Puerto Rico that were destroyed or damaged, severely damaged by Hurricane Maria back in 2017. The Pentagon saying that those programs were not going to be funded until 2020. The contracts were not going to be doled out until then. So they felt that there was enough time to continue to take away that money for now, because they really think that what's going to happen is that the Congress, or at least they're hoping is, that the Congress is going to put back the $3.6 billion that they took away from these funds and for the that was diverted towards the border wall, and that then the money that was originally in those accounts is going to go back so that these programs can continue.
And Louis, some of the projects, in addition to the Puerto Rican military reconstruction, it could have a real impact on military families and children. I'm struck by the fact there hasn't been a lot of outcry about those. Schools, housing projects also put on delay here.
That's right. We're talking specifically about 9 schools, most of them stateside. They're talking about refurbishing or renovating 8 of those schools. One of them was going to be a brand new facility that they were going to build. But what they told us yesterday from a senior defense official was that these are programs currently that are funded so that there are buildings already for these schools that so for the students can actually go to for the extended period, let's say, that the new renovations don't take place. So they're saying that they have the bandwidth, if you will, to take care of the students because they're already in existing facilities. It's just that one that is a new facility. One thing that's important, though, when they did look at the criteria for what programs they were going to divert funding from, they made a very strong case that they were not going to look at taking away money from any housing facilities, any barracks, any private residential. So that's one criteria that was met. We've not really seen anything that would indicate that there were housing facilities that were taken away from, had money diverted towards the border wall.
And real quick, Louis, an interesting twist and sort of a footnote to all of this. Of course, politics at play here as well. The White House coming out the past 24 hours saying all of this money could very easily be reinfused to all of these projects if Congress simply reallocates $3.6 billion in the next budget deal. Of course, Democrats are kind of balking at that, right? Is seeing this as a backdoor attempt to fund the border wall?
No, that's exactly right, Devin. The Congress would have to reallocate the money. They would have to vote once again for that amount to be put back into the accounts from which the money was diverted. That's essentially how it works. The Pentagon is optimistic that that could happen, but you're right. Democrats are saying they're not going to do this because they see this as a backdoor way of funding the border wall, which President Trump had always said was going to be funded by Mexico when he was on the campaign trail and continued to say during his rallies for the first 2 years of his administration. But this national emergency allowed the Pentagon to divert these funds and put it back in. They actually put it into their defense request bill submitted earlier in March that they wanted $3.6 billion to backfill this. So the money, I think, has been appropriated by the Senate, but I think in the House it's an uphill climb.
All right, Louis Martinez, always on the case for us over at the Pentagon. Thank you so much, Louis. And we should say that we're expecting to hear from a member of the military community down in Florida, Tom Newbauer. Actually, he's joining us now by phone. We've had some communications issues. Tom, I don't know if you can hear me. You're the president of Bay Defense Alliance, an independent nonprofit group advocating for those military facilities down there in Florida, some of which could see some funds drawn away. Thanks for coming in. What does it mean to you to see some of this funding actually pulled away from, say, Tyndall Air Base down there in Florida?
Well, I think it's important to note, and communities need to understand this, that military construction dollars are precious. And in this case, the $17 million fire station has been pursued for 10 years. But, 10 months ago, Hurricane Michael, a Cat 5 storm, completely changed Tyndall Air Force Base and the local community. So where this fire station was going may be redesigned as they build the base of the future here in Bay County. So we as a community are trying to build the community of the future. And we don't want to lose $17 million. We know it'll be deferred again. It has been done a number of years before, but we understand the priorities are important.
And what do you say to folks, Tom? A lot of breathless reaction up here, particularly from Democrats, that this is a huge blow to national security efforts, especially coming from a president who's talked about building up the military, spending more on the military, to see these funds shifted away. Does that not bother you as an advocate for the military?
Oh, absolutely. We all want to see our projects and our communities go forward. And I know that the Department of Defense and the Air Force have worked hard to ensure that the military construction projects that are on this list are not going to impact national security. Maybe mission fidelity will not be damaged, but they're projects that will go on at some point in the future. And in our case, it worked out fairly well, simply because this redesign of Tyndall Air Force Base will happen over the next 3 to 4 years.
So you're hopeful you'll see the money in the end, and sort of as a gut check on where Tyndall stands, it's hit pretty hard by Hurricane Michael. How are things looking there right now? I know you've been tracking the rebuilding effort.
Absolutely. They've spent about $700 million so far on Tyndall Air Force Base. It's being redesigned as the base of the future to accommodate missions that we'll see well into the next 70 years. So our community wants to make sure that we're the community that supports that kind of a base. We know that this $17 million will come back at some point, but when you're spending the kind of money they are now to make this base great again, we're pretty excited that that's going on.
Interesting perspective, very measured response, optimistic one at that as well. Tom Newbauer, president of the Bay Defense Alliance, on the outlook of shifting some of this funding away from Pentagon projects. Thanks so much, Tom. Appreciate you sticking through the communications issues to join us on ABC News Live. Finally today, some news about light bulbs. News that could actually impact your pocketbook, also impact the environment as well. Our Ann Flaherty covers our agency's beat here at ABC News. Also joined here in the conversation by Andrew Dolosky. He's Executive Director of the Appliance Standards Awareness Project. Andrew, great to see you. And let's start with you, because the president and his administration apparently want to make the light bulb great again. You've got a light bulb there.
I got a light bulb
They are rolling back some restrictions that President Obama put on the good old-fashioned light bulb, and now he's making those restrictions go away. Tell us about it.
That's right. Well, I think what to know about this is actually something that was passed into law and signed by George W. Bush, and it was requiring that light bulbs meet certain efficiency standards by 2020. What Obama did was, when he looked at it in 2017, right before he left office, is he said, I think we're forgetting about some light bulbs, the recessed lighting you have in your kitchen that's so ubiquitous now. Yes, the candle-shaped light bulbs that you put in your chandelier. He says, I think that those should be covered too. Well, then the lobbyists descended, and as soon as Trump took office, he started to look at this, and his energy department decided, we're going to give these light bulbs a pass.
So now the manufacturers can keep making the good old-fashioned specialty light bulbs. They're the only ones
so
that are
the ones
still
that are
exempt.
the incandescent traditional light bulbs will probably be phased out in 2020 if they cannot meet those efficiency standards, and we're going to be looking at more LED light bulbs for most of the market.
And Andrew, you've sort of been tracking the past day or two as this news has broken how this will impact consumers, and your argument seems to be that it actually will make things more expensive for consumers. Tell us about it.
Yeah, the rollback of light bulb standards will for sure create more costs for consumers. The LED light bulb is a great product, and a lot of consumers are buying them already. What the standards do is they raise the floor to ensure that all light bulbs that would be sold as of 2020 would include this great new technology that not only saves energy, but also lasts a lot longer. We estimate that if the standards were kept in place, a typical household would save about $100 per year in utility bill savings. And in addition to that, another benefit is that when we save energy in our homes, that means that we produce less power in power plants. So that's less coal and natural gas being burned that contributes to global climate change and the emissions that also create air pollution. So it's a win-win for consumers and the environment if we were to keep these standards in place. So it's a shame the Trump administration is rolling them back.
Well, given the fact that these rules are in place right now for specialty bulbs, one would think that the manufacturers would have shifted over to be in compliance with the standards. So does rolling them back actually change anything? Are there companies out there that still want to make them the old-fashioned way? Do we know?
Well, I think we know that
there are.
Yeah, I think we know that some of the manufacturers lobbied to get rid of these rules, so they do want to keep making them. But they are going to have alternatives on the market, and consumers can, choose those lesser energy bulbs.
And we did just see a statement from the industry. They say the trend, as we've been talking about, will continue towards those more efficient bulbs, although for now they're very happily cheering this rollback. Why is the administration doing this, Ann? You've covered so many of these little policy changes that touch all different corners of our lives, and it does seem that the president has made a name for himself when it comes to bringing things back to the way they were before Obama.
I think that a lot of business businesses would argue that anytime you put a federal regulation in place, it's going to hurt their business to some degree because it's a marker that they then have to meet, and then they have to prove that they have to meet it. But I think there's a bigger issue here, which is that we're really in sort of a culture war. So Trump is going to bring up issues like straws and light bulbs, and he's going to make a point about saying, you know, this is just silliness. And Elizabeth Warren, I think, told on a CNN debate last night, said, of course that's what the fossil fuel wants us to debate, is straws and light bulbs, when really we should be having a broader discussion about fossil fuels.
And Andrew, over at the Appliance Standards Awareness Project, what are you guys planning to do next as part of this back and forth campaign going forward? What's your next step in all this?
Well, we think that the rollbacks are illegal. They will be challenged in court. So one of the next steps will be that a court will have to decide whether or not the administration's actions are legal. It's important that they're pursued because the impacts for consumers, the impacts for the environment are important. I think the point about this isn't going to solve the climate crisis all by itself, but there are a lot of things that we have to do to improve energy efficiency, to reduce global climate change emissions, and improving energy efficiency of light bulbs is just one small thing. But we got to do a lot of small things if we're going to address this problem that we have.
All right, Andrew Delaski, Executive Director of the Appliance Standards Awareness Project. Thank you so much for your perspective, Andrew. Great to see you. And as always, Ann, it's great to have you here. Thanks for your reporting.
Thank you, Devin.
For enlightening us today on light bulbs. Appreciate that. Finally, today, we're giving a call out to all of you who have ideas for questions for the Democratic candidates ahead of the ABC News Live, Univision debate coming up next week, 1 week from today. September 12th in Houston, Texas. ABC wants to know what questions you have for the candidates. You can tweet us with the hashtag DemDebate, tweet at ABC or at ABC Politics. We actually are looking at the responses to your questions as our team begins to compile questions for the candidates. 10 candidates. It's one night only. Next week, right here on ABC News Live, Hulu, Roku, Facebook Watch, and the like. Entire team coverage starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time to midnight, really, here on ABC News Live. Hope to see you then. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. We'll be right back here tomorrow in the briefing room. Thanks.